Okay, so I think it's as good a time as any to kick off. Thank you to everybody who has joined us today. Appreciate it's very hot out there. We're obviously talking about flexible working, returning to the office, should we, shouldn't we, that kind of thing. Certainly today, I wish I was in the office because we have air conditioning. That's I suppose, a minor point. So just to intro myself, those of you tuning in every week know who I am. I'm Paul Church, Managing Director of Interquest. Today is a good day for this meetup group. The HR talent and staff and professionals. We just hit 250 members, so thank you to everybody who has joined and who's been sharing it and liking it and consistently tuning in. And we just want to keep growing this really, and growing, evolving the content. So do please give feedback, share with your colleagues and your peers, and always happy to take any feedback as to how we can improve it. But today, so we're talking about flexible working, returning to the office, and I suppose this conversation has been born out of the, I suppose, the mixed messages that have been coming through so many different streams. So from the government, from the media over the last few months. Certainly, most of us were working from home primarily for many months, and then suddenly the government kind of puts out there that businesses can do what they want to do, and they just kind of let you guys sort it out. So then you're left with challenges that businesses face because maybe they feel they need people to be in the office to be more productive, but then if you're looking at the people side of things, people may not feel safe. They rightly are fearful of what's going on out there. We've been fed a lot of media negativity over the last few months. There is obviously a real risk to it, and as well as that, I think a lot of people have realized that maybe they want to work in a different way now. Now we've been forced to stop, reflect, and look at our lives. A lot of people thinking, maybe I don't want to work in an office 5 days a week. So again, going back to the businesses, some businesses are thinking, should we get everyone back? Do we need an office? So there's a huge amount of conversation to be had around this. But this will hopefully be a good starting point. I just want to introduce our two guests today, our two speakers. So firstly, we had Olya Yakzhina, and we've got Karthika Baiju. So Olga, do you mind just kind of introducing yourself and your background and your current position?
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. Really hyped to be speaking here for you and with you today. So exactly, thanks so much for introducing me, Paul. I am currently working as a people manager at a startup called Switchee. And before, I've been working at other sort of startup scale-ups, all in the tech industry. My experience really started in the field of operations, and then I sort of made my way up into HR because of my true passion for people and making sure things work. So it's kind of having my operations background and bringing it into people with the psychology degree I had, with some coaching education that I had. I'm trying to really merge the two and make the HR world work. So this is sort of where my passion is coming. Something that I really focus on is employee experience, culture, ensuring that every processes and policies are developed and implemented with employees in mind. And I love to start each one of my projects to clearly define what it is that we're doing, why we're doing it, and how the hell we're going to make it happen. So this conversation here is really close to my heart because it is focusing on, all those three things. So I'd really love to share my thoughts with you guys today. Thank you for having me.
Perfect. Thanks, Olga. And Karthika, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I started out my career in recruitment. So I was recruiting. And then sort of made my way up, I suppose, into the world of HR and recruitment as well, and talent. So my degree basically was in biomedical sciences, which is, sort of scientific, data-driven. And I always had a mind for when you're looking at people and talent and analytics, you've got to merge those two things. You've got to merge data, you've got to merge people's interactions and empathy, and bring all those two things together. So I was very process driven. So moving on, I kind of was like, okay, well, HR is perfect for me, got your data. I'm now sort of head of people at Integrate, unfortunately just made redundant, sorry guys, but looking for my next opportunity to do exactly that. in my next company. So hopefully today I can share with you all the amazing things I did at Integrate and how I made it work really for them with people and data and bringing those two things together, driving process.
Perfect. All right, great. Well, look, it's great to have you both. And to the audience, just same as last week, I'll be running through some questions. If you'd like to ask either of the speakers or both the speakers a question throughout or at the end, just pop a note in the chat box, then I can open it up to you when we get an opportunity. But Karthika, if I go straight back to you, and I suppose if we start off, just I suppose, what are your opinions on, I suppose for me, there's three elements, as I said earlier. So you've got kind of what the government said, you've got what businesses feel and need and think, and then you've got how people feel, people in the businesses. So what are your opinions on the mixed messages we've had from everybody on kind of returning to work and what's been going on out there over the last few months?
I think obviously the government have had a lot of mixed messages. We're being kind of told, okay, one thing one day, follow what we're doing another day, keep following it. But in all honesty, I think a lot of this is to do with common sense. We have to use our common sense a little bit here. We can't always rely on the government and the government guidelines. And I think it's important for organizations to use their common sense, to use their employees as voices, and really bring that out. It's a time to be collaborative within your organization, I think. And when the government isn't giving you the right guidelines, maybe your employees can, and they're the best voices for you. And it is a collaborative team effort. So yeah, I think organizations need to probably think about how they're communicating a lot more, because we're not being given guidelines, we've not been given the right appropriate direction. But I also think, you know, employees have a lot of emotions around this as well, because they're kind of lost. You know, it's our job to sort of be on the other receiving end of those types of emotions and saying, actually, no, we're here to guide you. We want to hear your voice. We want to hear your concerns. And let's make a team plan together. Let's be collaborative, use our common sense here.
Absolutely, common sense. I'm with that 100%. And I'll go, what do you think?
I think for us, it has largely been, you know, a way of trying to combat the anxiety that all of these mixed messages and all of the media were sending out to people. We would definitely have people, you know, kind of translating that anxiety onto each other after they would find a news article of a few more cases, or next wave is coming in October, or all these things, where they would screenshot these messages, they would put them in some general channels in Slack where everybody else can get a little bit excited about what's coming as well. So it has really been, you know, a way of trying to manage, I guess, the mood, because what we are dealing with at the moment is our virtual selves. You see myself as a little picture on the screen, I see you as a little picture of the screen, and we do remember each other as still human beings with emotions and with our physical bodies, our mood swings, our things. So it has really for us been a way of trying to identify how to still realize whether our people are still fine on the other end of that camera, and whether they do receive the support that they need in order to kind of survive this period together with us. We have also been really transparent with how we feel ourselves. So our leadership would talk about how they feel about this. They would have children, they would have childcare, and kind of something that really helped us there was just sort of being transparent and really honest about what's happening in the SLT team, and realizing how all of that is happening to everybody else in the business. So it has really been, you know, about dealing with the aftermath of the media rather than dealing with sort of the coronavirus, and with there was no requests to sort of return back into the office, obviously, until all of this is over. And people have been quite anxious in general. At least in our company, we do have a few people who are shielding, or who are in the category of people who are shielding. So we had to be extremely careful with making sure that, the things that we do and the way that we conduct ourselves online still does not show that other people who, you know, are children can't leave their house, they still have that support, and they still can talk to us and tell us, you know, I need some flexible time here. I need to tend to my childcare. I need to tend to some things I need to tend to. I need to take my child to primary school or something. So it's, for us, largely it was about just listening in and providing the support where and when it is needed, rather than sort of building some plans and giving people like that future sort of, this is what we're going to do, A, B, C. We would rather kind of deal with what the mood is at the moment and providing support as it happens, while being transparent and telling them that we are planning for the future, but it will all depend on how you guys feel.
Absolutely, 100%. I think never has empathy been as important as it has been in these last few months, because, you know, you're not around people to kind of really see how they feel. You know, as you say, you're just seeing that little picture on the screen, and you really need to kind of put yourself in other people's shoes to understand, you know, what situation they're in, and don't underestimate the impact of, you know, being glued to the TV, seeing the latest news about coronavirus and what's going to happen, and the fear that kind of puts into you kind of consciously or subconsciously. So, Olga, what kind of impact has COVID-19 had on your business, and how else have things changed for you over the last few months, or at your company anyway?
So I think at the very beginning of it, and even sort of before all of this happened, Switchee was already quite well equipped with working remotely. There were already a few people in the company that were actively working remotely from other towns in the UK. And it wasn't sort of much of a organizational shock to the structure when more people started being remote, more than before. Also, kind of the fact that we are pretty agile, it really helped with establishing or adjusting some of our core processes to make sure that they do work remotely. So in terms of kind of the larger business impact, organizationally and logistically, it has not been so much of an issue. However, you know, you would of course have your commercial aspect of it that has suffered through coronavirus, because, you know, everybody has had some sort of financial impact on their business. So this has certainly not left us. We did pause our recruitment. So this is, you know, also something that has inadvertently created some impact on the resources that are available in the business. And with us working from home and having more time to work like with our computer in our hands, we really needed to do something to prevent burnout there, because you have that sort of inability to keep recruiting and fill in those gaps, and you have that kind of almost unexpected psychological impact of just having your computer with you a bit more often than you usually do, because maybe at work you would have left it at the office overnight, and you wouldn't want to work on your Google Sheet sort of at 8 p.m. because you remembered how to do this one formula. So just it's about, for us, it was also about those things, just kind of managing mental health was really important. But yeah, like the larger impact of kind of how other businesses have been surviving coronavirus, I would think that we would not have been excluded from that impact, but we are doing our best to make sure that our people are supported through it as much as we can. We had to adjust some organizational processes as well, just to make sure that people have a bit more support to go through this period because of that lack of recruitment. Such as knowledge transfer, for example, that has been a really big one. Creating, you know, some confidence articles, creating information and knowledge bases where people can go and help themselves, because you don't have that ability to sort of walk to your peer's desk and be like, hey, you know what, I'm feeling, you know, such and such right now, and sort of get some inspiration, get some conversation going about particular subject you don't know. Maybe you will delay that conversation until your next video call, and that would certainly impact the way you approach that task in the first place. So kind of those are the things that have changed as well as a result.
Absolutely, thanks for sharing. And Karthika, how have things changed for you with Integrate? What kind of impact has it had on your business?
So it's had a huge, obviously, financial impact. As Olga said, like, you know, everybody has had a financial impact from this. As an organization, you know, we've had a lot of restructuring that's happened. That's also affected myself. So, you know, there's lots going on, a lot of change within the business itself. And that comes down all to the financial impact that the business had. And initially, you know, the impact was, well, you know, there are a bunch of people who've never worked from home before, and this is probably going to be an extended period of time. These were discussions we were having. How long do we think this is going to be happening for? Do we have to set out budgets? You know, and if we do set out budgets, what kind of budgets are they going to be to allow people to actually work from home and have the resources to work from home? So that was our initial like thinking. Obviously, that was the first point of impact that we ever had. And then, you know, a lot of us had worked from home. So we did have the technology, we did have security within our laptops and, you know, all of the data protection that we had. And maybe IT needed to do some extra work just to make sure that everyone can work remotely, get the VPN in. So it all happened super quickly. And it was like one day, okay, you're in the office, the next day you're gone. That's an impact in itself to any employee, like being within the office and then telling people in the afternoon, actually, guys, it's not looking good, get gone. You know, we're a company that also travels because we have a US base as well. So we're a company that travels between the two, and a lot of employees travel around the world as well. So that was an impact in itself. It's like, okay, well, how are we going to run our business? We're not going to see our colleagues in the US anymore. Connectivity is going to be decreased. Like, what are the impacts that this is going to have on the future? And then we started thinking, once fires were out, initially, everyone go home. Are we set up? Do we have a budget that we can give each and every employee to buy, you know, certain work from home equipment, chairs, things like that. Then we had to think about longer term impacts that this is going to have. Okay, so you can't meet your you can't meet your colleagues in the US now. That's an impact in itself, because, you know, we liked that face to face. We liked seeing other employees out there because we thought we could get more done that way. But on the other flip side, the impact it has had is that people are now more connected than ever, because they get this asynchronization across the board, right? So, you know, when the US wakes up and sends an email, before you were in the office and then you just kind of switched off. Now it's like, okay, you will respond to that email when you can. And this ability of flexibility starts coming about, and this asynchronization. And that's obviously impacted the business because people are having to adapt, and they're having to adapt quickly. And a lot of this is to do with change management. And it is how, especially within my profession anyway, we have to do a lot of transformation, a lot of change management. And how we do that is really important, how we set up those processes, because if we don't set up those processes correctly and we don't transform correctly, those impacts can be made to look more significant than they are to any employee. So it's about connectivity. How is that impacted financially? How we've been impacted? We've been impacted quite a lot. I mean, people were put on furlough, now they're being made redundant. Like, so that's going to have a fundamental change, and people are going to look back and go, "Wow, this is impacted my life." But what we want employees to feel is that it's impacted your life, but what are the skills coming out of this? What are the skills we're offering you from this? We can turn that narrative around a little bit. But yeah, plenty of impact has happened. Nothing can be changed really too soon, too quickly. But yeah, I think it is important to do some planning ahead. I mean, things can change ultimately. It's such a buoyant market. Things can change a lot. You know, a second wave is due to hit us. How is your business ready for this now? Is the next question, I guess.
100%, absolutely. Things are changing week by week in the country, in the market, in the economy. Is there anything, I suppose, what would you, if in terms of your business and the work you've been doing with Integrate, what have you got kind of a good example of something you're proud of, or you think Integrate have done really well, that is perhaps not like for like, that people who are in the audience might be able to take away and think about, okay, maybe we could do something like this?
Yeah, so one of the conversations that we did have, even before sort of we put people into lockdown, was you know, when everyone had gone into lockdown, we looked at productivity, and productivity was one of the things that we looked at as a metric. Are people working well from home? And these were done through surveys, through pulse surveys. So if no one's heard of pulse surveys, these are sort of questions, how engaged are your employees basically through these surveys. And then we looked at performance engagement, right? So how well are they performing during this time? And we really narrowed it down within this sort of time initially. And we found that people were working really well. People were being productive. People, you know, considering the resources were slim because people had gone on sort of furlough, being made redundant, or, you know, resources were getting slim, the metric was coming out. And the metric was really good for productivity. It wasn't that people were taking on excess of work, but we realized that with change like furlough, resources are limited, as Og said. So what did we have to do to make sure people weren't getting burnout? And well, you know, now they have flexible Fridays, which is Flexi Fridays. They take the afternoon off. And it was a discussion we were having even before a lockdown or before this situation happened. So this wasn't a short-term goal for us. This was very much a discussion point we had back in December before any of this happened. And I'm glad these discussions were happening. And it's one thing I'm really quite proud of, that those types of discussions were happening well before COVID. So we were thinking much more forward and thinking ahead. Another discussion we always had was around, you know, the office space, I suppose. What do we do about the office space? Because, you know, is it going to go up in rent? You know, it's really hard to say at this kind of time. Is it going to come down in rent? Another discussion was co-working spaces. Could we take some budget and give it to others to maybe go to their co-working space or set up their spaces so that they're working efficiently at home and being productive? So those were budgets that we had put in place for employees and made sure that they had flexible Fridays and took time off. Yeah, that's it, really.
Perfect. Thanks, Karthika. And it's interesting about the office because we've got a lot of clients, just because this has been going on for 5 months now, whose leases are just running out anyway. So you have to be pretty brave now to extend your lease by 3 to 5 years, not knowing whether you're going to need that office space at all. So that's an interesting point. Olga, what about kind of Switchee? What kind of I suppose what examples have you got of something you feel Switchee have done really, really well?
Mm-hmm. So I love the idea of just asking people what they want. And for us, one of the first things that we have done is we've done a survey. And again, obviously, we've done some conversations with people where I've spoken to everybody when I first joined Switchee for like an hour, and we were chatting about how it is working there. I spoke to people who have been working remotely for Switchee for a while and what were the benefits for them and how they remained so engaged, sort of what was it that was working for them remotely. But then also kind of speaking with people now and seeing how they're feeling. We've then done this survey and we found out that actually most people do prefer this aspect, and coming back, they do want something more flexible. But also we have identified some people who just could not wait any longer to return to the office environment. We have to be careful with this because obviously, you know, as soon as the government told us that we can sort of start coming out a little bit and be alert, that's when our people couldn't stay at home anymore, but also couldn't do their work properly at home anymore, because we have hardware engineers that need a working station, that need little metal parts to be putting them together, and that need like a separate space rather than their own bedroom to keep all these supplies. Just imagine sort of how bad it is for your mental health. Just not only have your laptop next to your pillow, but also be literally surrounded with the stuff that you do for your work. So for those people, we have allocated some office spaces that were within walking or cycling distance to their homes, to make sure that, you know, they were safe going into those offices, but also to make sure that they mentally were safe with continuing working. And we did have kind of, this is what I think I'm really proud of, is that we did act very, very quickly. So almost immediately after all of that feedback came back, we got together and we decided to allocate these office spaces for people, find the office really quickly, get people in there very quickly. And sort of that has been really good for them. But then I think another part, which I'm sure most companies would have also done, is looking at health and safety of working from home. So we did the survey and we sort of asked, you know, do you have a comfortable chair that you sit on? We sent people a video of how to set up their home working desk to make sure that it's all healthy for their back and their eyes and their elbows and all that stuff. And then just one by one sending them all of the equipment they need in order to be working in that healthy way that will not damage them for the next 5 months. So I think I'm really happy with kind of how this turned out. The response has been really positive. People have enjoyed this kind of approach, that they were asked what they want to do and then they kind of have been given what they want. I think it is also important to kind of remain flexible with that, because, you know, some people are still shielding and they really are not comfortable going out. Then there are some people who really, really want to go out and they really want some human contact and they want to have that face-to-face social where they see each other finally, go for like a cider or something and just enjoy the summer in each other's company. So it was also about trying to find a healthy balance for socials and giving people some fun, giving people some breakdown between kind of work and connecting with each other. Finding some social events that would really do that virtually is quite difficult. So we had to be, you know, quite elaborative with trying to try some games, seeing what the response for that was straight away, and then choose a similar game or tweak that game in a certain way, just to match again those expectations from people and to give them a little bit more fun that they were looking for. So I think that is kind of another thing that I'm really happy with what we were able to do, is that we didn't just sort of send one survey at the very beginning, ask them how they feel, and then did this and now we sort of left it. We continuously iterate on how we run our events and we continuously get feedback for what we can do better to literally improve week on week with what we offer as content, but also as interactions, as meetings, as leadership updates to our people. So been quite happy with how that went.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there's some really nice innovations and sentiments there from both Integrate and Switchee. So hopefully that the audience have kind of appreciated that. So thanks for sharing. So now we've got a few, I put out on the meetup the other day, a few, if anyone wanted to had any questions pre this event. So I'm going to go through a couple of those now. If anybody has a question they'd like to ask live, then just put your name in the chat. Peter, I know you've put a question in there, which I'll go through with the speakers in a sec. But if anyone else wants to ask something, please do just put your name in the chat box. So first question, I'll go straight back to you, Olga. Is not wanting to go back to the office because you've got used to the new regime a good enough reason? And can you create a case by case for each employee?
Mm-hmm. I think what we need to really understand here before we kind of go into it is whether it is a health concern, or whether it is not a concern, but whether it is a preference for long-term future working. I think ultimately it is the employer's decision, the leadership's decision, to ensure that the long-term vision for the business is well thought out before any such policies go out to people and any such communication goes out. some companies may need the unity and that togetherness aspect of it to be productive and impactful in their spheres of the market as a whole. So being productive individually from home does not always equate to being productive as the entire unit, pushing in the same direction, achieving alignment, building your culture, especially when companies are very, very young. I think getting your vision straight is the first thing I would personally recommend. If you are able to support remote working financially and operationally, you are, able to support your culture and your engagement, then you might be able to consider opening this up for a remote first setting and, do exactly what you said before, kind of be on a case-by-case basis, offering that scenario to people who really feel like this is their way of life forward. I agree that, when we speak of employee happiness and engagement, we speak of some very different scenarios. Employees kind of bouncing ideas of each other in the office. You would have people who sit very closely together, especially in those kind of modern startup offices which don't have many walls, and you kind of are all in the same room with the same desks next to each other, where developers can overhear some sales conversations, get some inspiration for their new feature. Maybe product managers will overhear some marketing conversations of how they're preparing for the next conference or webinar, and identify a pain point that they're dealing with in order to present or explain a technical feature to the audience better. So maybe they can just go ahead and of their own accord help them with that. We should not forget that when we are remote, without that common space, we may remove the opportunity of these random things happening, which can be very helpful. But I mean, ultimately, I think this may impact the engagement long term. So we need to make sure that kind of as a business, we look at our ability to maintain engagement, whether we have the resources in place or, what do we have missing to put in place to make sure that we support that engagement. I recently sort of started using this metaphor for comparing the Russian COVID vaccine. I'm Russian myself, so I can do a little bit of a joke about that maybe. Sort of comparing the metaphor for Russian COVID vaccine with the long-term remote working. We did not have enough time to test this before assuming that there is not going to be any negative consequences. So we're really not going to know what's going to happen. If we had a company that has always been functioning this one way, yes, cool, it worked for 5 months and we didn't see anything breaking, but does it mean that it's going to work for 5 years? So we need to really think of our vision and think of whether we have the process in place to support something like this before we open it up to people and be like, do you want to work remotely? You have the opportunity. We need to sort of mull these things through together before we open that up.
Absolutely. Great answer. Thanks, Olga. And Karthika, do you have anything to add around that question at all?
Yeah, I mean, Olga said it all really. But it was, my point is everyone's different, right? Everyone's circumstances are different. The reason someone asks for something like that, there are different reasons around it. And it's important for employers to find out those reasons, because, you might find that multiple people are saying that. So then you come on to stumble upon a metric where you're like, oh, well, there's multiple people saying that. And I just want to go back to, so LinkedIn did a stat, just recently, I think it was today, and they put it out about what people actually want within the UK about working. And now each sector is obviously going to be different. If you're in hospitality, you're going to probably want to go back, or you feel obliged to go back and obligated, like you have to go back. If you're in sort of tech, now what's to say you have to go back, right? So a lot of people are asking for more flexible working, and that's why this is here today as a webinar, because people want that, they crave that. But we are also creatures of habit. Like ultimately, we are creatures of habit, and changes can scare us. So for 5 months, we've been working one way, and then suddenly you're asking someone to change that habit again and work another way. I think everything has to happen in time and slowly. There is a comfortability level, and offering sort of hybrid is sort of maybe, in my opinion, a really good way of getting sort of people back into an understanding. Again, like health and safety, you know, we don't really have guidelines on that. People have just been asked to go in. What are we going to do? So health and safety is something we have to consider. We have to consider the changing laws every day around employees. Can we actually keep up? Are our processes scalable? Like maybe you're a little startup, or maybe you're a scaling company but haven't got enough processes that are scalable. So then you're going to have to think about your innovation being remote or having more employees remote, versus seeing them in a meeting and getting it all done then and there. But, you know, I think if you get the foundations right, I think this could be an incredible opportunity for companies to move into sort of that flexible working and that space. But again, it's not just a good enough reason, in my opinion, just to say I'm not going in. But, you know, you got to have to consider everyone's different circumstances and everyone's feelings around this as well. Everyone's human, ultimately.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything you said. I think you're right. I think just saying, you know, you don't want to go into the office isn't enough. I think the challenge that the businesses might have moving forward is that if they aren't open to flexibility, then whilst everyone's kind of, I think a lot of people are hanging on to their jobs right now, but things will get better. And if you don't offer that flexibility, then once the market gets better, then some companies will be offering all that flexibility, and you might start losing your people as well. So it's something for business to consider. We've got a couple of questions coming through to the chat now, so we'll come to those in a second. I've got a couple more of the pre-questions, so I'll come back to you straight away, Karthika. So, what is the expectation for employees? Does a co-working space, for example, exude the values of a business if people aren't there living there together or working there together?
So this is a question that I think a lot of people have sort of, you know, asked in the last couple of weeks. Everyone has a different opinion on this ultimately. So my opinion is that a co-working space can work, right? So a co-working space can work. So on a day like this, it's really hot, you want to get out of your home, why not go to your local co-working space versus traipsing all the way to the office, right? That's going to make your you know, working and productivity more comfortable, and you're just going to be more productive that way. So I think productivity and culture are very different, two different things ultimately. So I mean, I think the notion is that you have to be in an office to build your culture and values, and that's not necessarily true. And this is just my opinion, but I don't think it's necessarily true. I think co-working spaces are there to facilitate employee productivity. So that side of things you could really work with. And going through some sort of stats that were obviously posted on LinkedIn, fundamentally that's what people want. They want that hybrid solution. They want to be able to take that hybrid solution. And you're going to have to also think about, okay, so if I'm going to have to do a co-working space, do I have the financial stability to do that as a business? Do we have, as a business, money to do that? So I think co-working spaces can work for a lot of companies. It doesn't mean your culture and values are lost. I think you're just going to have to be innovative with how you make your culture and values stand out to your employees and how you engage your employees ultimately. And I think that's a new level of innovation that not a lot of us have done. This is completely new to a lot of HR professionals. I don't know if any HR professional has ever gone through this in their lifetime. So saying that someone has loads of years of experience doing it doesn't exist. In this case, it does not exist. So, you know, when we're talking about this, I think we're going to have to talk about this in a really innovative way. We're going to have to think about, okay, co-working spaces, can it work? Sure. Long term, what are the effects? And that's the discussions we probably should be having with each other. Culture and values, where can we put that in? That isn't part of an office space, really. So are we doing that through socials? Are we doing that through, were we doing that through social events in the office? Were we having connectivity issues? Like, connectivity, for instance, a lot of the times you take surveys and a lot of people will say they only talk to 3 people actually in the office. They will talk to, and 3 people that are directly within their team. That's all that people talk to. So, how are we going to make sure that people stay connected? Because if it's, that bad in an office, imagine when you're not in an office, that connectivity. And that means you're not growing your culture, you're not growing your values as much as you should be. So, being innovative in a way of showing that we can actually grow that connection is going to be really important as well. But again, it hasn't been done before. So we can't say co-working spaces is always going to work and it's always going to build our culture. And we can't say those things, unfortunately. It hasn't been done.
Absolutely agree. We were saying last week, 2020, we are the guinea pigs for the future, aren't we? So everything's being tested out on us right now. Olga, anything to add to that one?
Yeah, it's for me, that conversation has also come up a few times when we were speaking kind of internally with some of my peers. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I think what I really enjoy about the values of the business is that, in my opinion and in my experience, I saw these values as becoming flexible. And maybe it's not something that is maybe very well discussed before. Kind of businesses are quite certain that they set the values up when they just begin, and then 10 years later it's all still the same values and the still same few paragraphs that define all of those extra 200 people that they have employed since then. So what I really enjoy about the values of the business is that I feel they're flexible and they live and they evolve together with the business. In my opinion, it is naive to assume that the values you have set years ago, when you had less than 10 employees on board, will remain and still be interpreted in the exact same way 5 years later. People make the values, essentially, and people are different. The experience makes the values as well, and the experience is changing. As businesses, the best we can do at this time is to ensure that the culture of our business does not dip or suffer during this period. There is no harm in the culture, evolving with the natural evolution of the business, as long as it does not skew itself in the wrong way. Personally, I feel that smaller companies that are scaling, for them it is more valuable to keep their people connected at the moment as much as possible. If you find a way of making this work remotely work for your business, then this will be a massive win. Although the culture will evolve with time, it is these few years when you're still young and forming yourself, forming your mindset, finding your footing within the market, that these few people will be the ones that will set the groundwork for your culture and those values. And it's really important that those are kind of well looked after at the moment, because it's going to impact it for years to come. With kind of some conversations happening before of like, oh, this is our office, this is our home, and this is our culture. I would be worried if your organization's culture only works in your office, because I think that a building does not describe a culture. So a culture is the mindset, a culture is the feeling, it is the atmosphere, and it is the way that people essentially treat each other, and it is your ways of working. When you bring somebody on board, you don't check that their shirt fits with your color of your walls in the office, right? You ask them for some behavioral questions, you ask them for your culture fit, and that is what is going to continue being the same. So I don't think that the co-working spaces, their existence or the absence of those, or anything that's in between, is really going to impact your culture if you just have some good processes of growing your culture and nurturing your culture and just sort of making sure that you look after it in the right ways.
Perfect. Thanks, Olga. Some really good takeaways from both those answers. So thank you for those. So we've got. I'll ask one more of the pre-questions, then I'll go to the couple we've got in the chat box. So this is quite a big one. This is around learning and development, and we're going to be running a webinar, I think, beginning of September, just purely on this. It'd be great to get both your takes on this. So the question we had was how could you manage learning and development remotely, and does it differ depending on level of experience? So, Olga, what do you think?
I love learning and development. So when I sort of in my early kind of career, and this is how I moved into the field of HR, is I've become a learning and development coordinator. So I have done a lot of work around sort of making this available to people. So very passionate about the subject, really happy that somebody has asked this question. I have a lot to say, but I will try and keep it concise, obviously. So for L&D, I think in this period, essentially, I do not think that it's going to be extremely different. Again, it's about your ways of approaching this subject. I think that in fact, L&D may have less barriers when we're working remotely. Imagine you're sitting in the office with your headphones on and you're listening to a webinar while people are able to approach you from the desk nearby, tap you on the shoulder, ask you for a very urgent issue, very important question, ask for your help, or just in general, you have these distractions ongoing. Sometimes in my experience and from the data that I'm collecting from people, I have noticed that people have more learning and development hours booked for themselves on days that they are working from home or that they were working from home post-COVID. So I think there is some essence to that. Perhaps there is less stigma, maybe, as they're not literally seen as being disengaged from their day-to-day. And maybe they feel in the comfort of their own walls that they need to learn something new. And now is the time that they're going to close that tab and open this tab. And sort of there's going to be no judgment. They are safe to do so. I think another part to learning and development right now, and the reason why it's so important to pay attention to it, is that I mentioned this before, it's the burnout of working at home. People work harder because there's less distractions and because there's less time to waste commuting. Your laptop lays next to your bed, so sometimes people begin working as soon as they wake up, even before their coffee, just to check on some emails, and that can become unhealthy with time. So I think that learning and development is a great way to break up that stream of constant work and encourage people to take some more time for themselves and detach themselves a little bit to find, a path to their personal career development and growth, essentially. So I feel like you can make it work, and you can maybe even get a bit more engagement into your learning and development if you haven't had that before. Have it now.
Perfect. Thanks, Olga. Karthika, what do you think of that question?
So, in my opinion, L&D never had to be done in an office space. It's about keeping all your employees skilled. That's the main thing, right? And now more than ever, a lot of employees are having to upskill because there's not the resources there. So how are we changing learning and development to be creative? So it's really about encouraging sort of that creativity, that innovation, and that sort of pure experimentation in that environment space. And this is not lost if you don't come into an office anymore. And if you don't come into an office every day. It's about just changing your L&D strategy. That's all it is. It's changing that strategy. So at Integrate, we were challenged. So sort of we challenged the typical sort of status quo, and a lot of the L&D that we had interpreted was sort of self-directed learning. For instance, that was one of the things that we had implemented, and we made sure that we gave all our employees the resources so that they could do the self-learning, whether it be the tools, and those tools were all online. So those tools were all online. They weren't physical. Anything was physical. So the self-directed learnings were tools that we kept online. And other ways we include sort of simple things like, things like book club, like getting people collaborative. It's a very practical solution. Read a book, collaborate with your educational peer groups and discuss. And this gives you also a sense of like building your culture, building your values, building that sort of L&D as well, and being collaborative outside of that sort of workspace or office space. Because, and as I said, like that can be encouraged now more than ever, being remote. And we provided sort of employees with sort of prepaid cards. Prepaid cards were the ultimate things, because it meant that people took charge of their own learning and development. So prepaid cards, you know, the leadership team thought that was a great way of taking sort of responsibility of your own sort of growth and your own development. And I think the traditional L&D strategies can sometimes be sort of too mandatory. And it takes away from the culture maybe that you're trying to build of being a new and innovative and providing impactful change. And if you're not a company that does L&D impactfully, like it can impact the productivity as well. So I think L&D sort of, if it's too traditional, can go one way. If it's, you know, like way too much trust with the L&D element, can go another way. But I do think a lot of it comes to employees having that self-learning, having trust, being autonomous with their own learning and development.
Perfect. Thanks, Karthika. And we 2 weeks ago we did a webinar on L&D and remote working competencies with Danny Sadhu. So if anybody didn't see that, there's really good content there. So do go back and take a look at that. But let's go to our chat box, and I've got a couple of questions here. So first one, I think us three were talking about this the other day, and I don't think we're going to necessarily have the answer to it, but it's worth just kind of just seeing if this has come up for both of you at all. So employees have a contract. This is from Peter McDonald, by the way. Employees have a contract, and most state you need to work in the office. Now, with working from home, employees don't want to go back to the office. What do we do in HR in these cases? Now, this is something that I've been speaking to a lot of clients about recently. And Peter, I've actually got a client who's going through this right now. So give me a note after this so I can put you in contact and maybe you guys could have a chat. But Karthika, is this something that you've come across yet at all?
Yeah, this happened before COVID.
Oh, okay.
Actually, so we had an employee who was working remotely, and there are some things that you need to definitely take into consideration. So the one thing is, you know, I think often senior leaders forget there are contracts, and there are things that before you let someone work remotely and fully remotely versus someone else, there are things to consider. A, how does it affect the rest of the employee team, because that person is fully remote, so people know that you can work fully remote. Secondly, you know, someone saying, oh well, they're working fully remote, so they don't have any expenses, for instance. They don't have to come into the office, and yes, we're having to tab for every time that person comes into the office. We have to take the expenses on as well, because we've contractually given them remote working. Also, remote working also means they could be in a different country. And you get to a situation where someone is in a different country and it affects taxes and their taxes. So it's important for employees to understand how, firstly, tax implications if they're working maybe from Italy. They first started working from the UK and now they're working from Italy or, you know, Portugal. What are the tax implications for that? Secondly, is the business willing to pay for those extras, because they're technically working from home, and if they have to come in once a month to the office or go to client sites or, you know, maybe come into the office to do some meetings, we're going to have to foot the expenses as well for that. So there are a lot of things to consider. You know, I think it's not as simple as just getting a remote contract sent out. I think ultimately, you know, your policies can come into this as well. It doesn't have to be necessarily, if you do have a, you know, a space where there is an office, it doesn't necessarily have to be fully remote or nothing. It can be, it's written up in your flexible policy. That you come in a few days a week or whatever, but yeah, definitely think about the extra stuff that goes into this. It is not that easy, and as I said, every employee is very, very different. So have a conversation with that employee, see how it will affect the rest of the employee population as well, and are you ready to scale that if in case others ask.
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely a minefield. And Olga, is this something that's come up for you so far?
Yes, absolutely. So something that I think is like exactly this, exactly like was already discussed now, how remote how remote do people want to work remotely? Sort of, do they want to work in a different time zone, or do they want to work in a similar time zone but they want to be in a different side of the country? I think that you do not have to change the contract, and you can keep the same contract if you do not anticipate that this person is going to go and work remotely forever. You can get away with a working remotely policy, or something that we have at the moment is just a flexible working policy that literally says that you can go ahead and work from wherever you want to work, as long as you agree this with your manager in advance and you discuss the impact it's going to have on your workload, if any, and on the team and sort of the wider business around you, how this is going to affect you. Definitely when it comes to tax implications from other countries, I see somebody wrote in chat the point, about the fact that you have 183 days, for example, for Italy before you need to start being taxed, and this is something that I have received some guidance on myself just recently. So getting up to speed with what you need to organize for international people can be challenging, and finding the right person to help you with that can also be challenging. So what we, for example, are dealing with at the moment is we are having somebody who wants to move to Italy, and they are anticipating of working there for up to a year. So something that we have to consider as well is that obviously after the 1st of January 2021, the EU and the UK sort of back and forth work reside is going to change. People are going to need to have a visa. So are you going to be paying for somebody's visa if they want to come back for something? So something that we, for example, have done, something that I would advise you to do to calculate the financial impact of this is, if you have an office space and you're paying for your office space anyways, and maybe you would have that person's desk there as accounted for, sort of how much budget do you have for that person for them to be working in the office per year, and then you take that budget and you think, with that budget, how many times can I get them into the country, buy them ticket and accommodation? For us it worked out about four times that we can bring them back and leave them not hanging somewhere in a hostel, but just sort of give them a nice accommodation to be in. So it's about kind of thinking in advance. When would you even need that person to come in? Do they have to come in for every single team quarterly event? Or, do they need to just come in for a big Christmas party? Our remote team away day is something that we do for everybody, and sort of maybe a summer party. Maybe that's all they want to come to. So this is just something to consider. But here, in terms of the question, I think it was regarding the contract and how to operationally do it. You don't have to change the contract if you don't anticipate this person working remotely forever. You can get away with the policy.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And Peter did ask a follow-on question as well. So sorry, to you, Olga. Are your employers paying towards working from home costs like internet, work desks, chairs at home, that kind of stuff?
So we did actually have some people who were already working remotely, and they would have, their own remote space set up to work remotely. So it's about that, if you have the facilities to work remotely and you want to continue working remotely, then maybe you can go ahead and do that. And most people would have already thought about it in advance if they want to be working remotely forever. So it was kind of easy for them, for us, to set these things up. We did send them some extra equipment just to make sure it's all safe. But from the safety point of view, this is what we have been doing, to make sure that somebody is not impacting their back pains, working remotely from wherever they are. We don't want people to sort of have some health issues because they're working with Switchee. It's not the right way to do it. So with sort of making sure that we just are careful with the type of budget that we bring. In our case, it was if we require you to do work for us, you will need equipment like technology, a piece of device that you want to do your work from. So that is as allocated as budget to you, no matter if you're remote or if you're in-house. But then there's also safety concerns. So, everybody got sort of that budget for making sure that their health and safety is met when they're working from home, and that's gonna be maintained for other people who will decide working remotely. I think that's an important thing to do. But yeah, we are not currently paying for the internet. This is something that sort of people would typically use the internet for, watching Netflix as well in their spare time. You can't really calculate like the actual value of the internet gigabytes that are going to work related purposes versus their kids watching cartoons in the morning. So it's kind of, that is a bit more flexible.
Absolutely fair enough. Thank you very much, Olga. So I'll just go now I'm just conscious of time. So I'll go to the final question in the chat box, and Karthika, I'll go straight to you. So I think you might have seen it because it was to everybody, but you were discussing productivity, and Zara Smithies would be interested to know, now we've gone through the initial transition of home working, how has it affected the bottom line of actual delivery of projects or hitting targets? What slippage or decline has anyone experienced? How are you dealing with this?
So I think, in my opinion, you have to look at productivity as a whole. Look at your teams, look at individuals, look at leaders, look at everyone, because, as I said, this is a changing world. Things happen so quickly. We were trying to put out fires before. Now we are having to adapt people into a way they can actually transition into this time, and they can transition effectively, and be productive. So I think the bottom line is that obviously with sales are going to be impacted, like whether we like it or not. But are they impacted for external reasons? Because obviously people are holding on to their cash as much as they can, so can't afford products, or are our salespeople individually being impacted? So it's important to find out what those reasons actually are. And a lot of the time, well, we know our salespeople do well on a normal day. If COVID never happened, they would do fantastically and they would be doing really, really well. But this is a new world. They're going to have to be innovative, and innovation takes time. It doesn't happen tomorrow. So there is going to be a slight impact on productivity. That's, going to happen across the board. Like, you're not going to have people who have just adjusted to this so easily and they are super productive straight away. Like, you're going to have some bad weeks, some good weeks. Like, you just went into an office, like, a lot of people were getting used to coming into the office every day, maybe, like, so with the actual delivery of projects, I think it's important to so leaders need to be communicative at this time more than ever. They need to actually look at external factors, internal factors. I think this is sort of going to be a little bit of a grace period for everyone. Don't jump the gun. We are all innovating. I'm innovating in my space. We're all having to innovate in our spaces. So I think it's going to be important that targets are realistic. First of all, they're not going to be the targets pre-COVID. Let's just be honest. Maybe you're in the lucky position where your company is flown and you're a Zoom. So maybe that's the case. And then, yeah, your delivery is going to be high. And your targets, you're going to be hitting higher than normal, or what you had probably thought about. And even with Integrate, like, they had a fantastic month on the advertising sort of side, and that really is a testament to the type of product that was, and the type of productivity the employees had as well. So all comes down to, there will be certain areas that will slip up. There will be certain areas that need time to innovate. And there are going to be certain areas that just we can't help at the moment.
Gotcha. Absolutely understood. Olga, just before we finish up, anything to add on that question from Zara?
I think exactly as exactly as was said, there are Sarah, it's so important to allow for some sort of grace period here, and then sort of seeing that as you are coming out, and as I guess on the commercial side, as your clients are starting to open up their budgets for all these things to come back into their arms, is your sales team or is your marketing, are they still as able to provide that to the same extent as they have been doing before? And this is really going to be the teller. And I think this is where learning and development is going to become really important, because we do not have the skills, or maybe not all of us, have the skills to work from home and be a great communicator online. Some of us have been sort of lived through the day and age where we met our boyfriends online, and we met our friends online, and sort of that's how we've always been. We always chatted online, but like it's just so important to understand that every single person is going to be very different, and some people would not have the same maybe confidence talking online, or maybe they're not going to have the same just passion maybe when they're doing it through the camera. These are all the skills and the competencies that people are currently acquiring day to day. The more they do it, the more they are sort of forced to go through this period that they do it. And going forward, it is going to be important to make sure that that aspect of their learning and development is looked at. That was just be kind of suggestion from my side.
Just to add on slightly, like I think it's really important to get in to talk to your leadership team and manage expectation here, because I think if that's not managed like straight away, I think you could be in trouble, really, is the main takeaway.
Absolutely. Understood. Well, look, I think there's been some really great content today. So thank you so much, both of you, for sharing it all. And I hope the audience appreciated it. And thanks everyone for tuning in on this really, really hot day. I know I certainly will be running down to the sea and jumping in head first as soon as I clock off to cool off. But next week we're going to be talking about parents returning to work and how businesses can help support them more. So please do tune in for that. But again, Olga and Karthika, thank you so much for today. This has been recorded, so we'll post it on LinkedIn. But yeah, thank you everybody, and thanks especially to the speakers.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Paul, for having us. It was a pleasure. And do reach out to us, everyone, if you still have any questions. We would be really open to connecting with you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, definitely connect with both of us on LinkedIn. Definitely want to hear from you guys as well. But thanks, Paul. This is great.
Thanks very much. Speak to you soon. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of the day.
Everyone. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.